Hey heroes, welcome to On Scene First. I'm your host, Tracy Eldridge. With over 25 years in public safety, I am wicked excited and honored to bring you entertaining, educational, and empowering conversations with public safety difference makers who are harnessing the power of out-of-the-box thinking when it comes to the use of the latest and greatest must-have technology tools, a people-first leadership approach, and mental health resources to save lives on both sides of the call. Before we get started, I would like to thank our hero sponsor, Squad Life, a law enforcement and Army veteran-owned company based in Long Island, New York. As the On Scene First merchandise production and distribution partner that provides quality, custom-made products, fundraising and partnership opportunities, and phenomenal customer service, we are thrilled to share them with the rest of our public safety family. Make sure you check them out at www.squad-life.com and tell them Tracy sent you. Now, on with the show. All right. Well, we are back, and I'm wicked excited to have today's guest, Reuben Ramirez from Versaterm, which is also the parent company, if you will, to Mindbase, which many of our 911 heroes across the U.S. are really starting to get to know, especially if you attend conferences. You're seeing Cassie and Ryan and some of the other folks out there. So, Reuben, welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. I've been chatting with some of your folks behind the scenes. Can't wait to hear everything that that you're going to share. I know we're going to have a really good conversation today. And just like any conversation that happens here at On Scene First, I don't love to give kind of disclaimers as far as what could trigger someone, but it's what we do and it's the conversations that we have. So folks just naturally know that we're going to have conversations that have to do with mental health, and you listen, to where you can. So, but on the plus side, if you're feeling a certain type of way after any conversations that we have, it's folks like Reuben and their team that are bringing us tools to handle these types of things. So with that, Reuben, how about you tell my listeners who you are? How did you get your start in public safety? Where did you come from?
Okay. Well, to start off, so I recently retired from the Dallas Police Department. I was an assistant chief with Dallas PD. I retired 5 months ago. Did 29 years. Like most people, started off very young in the first responder law enforcement profession. I was 22 years old when I started.
You just made that sound like a jail sentence, right? You're like, I did 29 years.
Yeah, I don't know why we do that. I think maybe that's because like these truths about wellness, I love the way you preface the conversation, because the truth is that what we're going to talk about and the things that I'm sure are talked about on your show these are very difficult. They're emotional, but that's one of the pieces that's kind of been left out of the equation. Like that should have been the absolute truth from the very beginning of this, that the first responder profession is a very emotional job. And that's probably something that was never really ever mentioned. But in fact, it is emotional, arguably one of the most emotional. And if we're ever going to get to a place where we really start to get our men and women well, till we really start to understand how to come to this noble profession and these noble professions and actually thrive in it. And somehow, maybe is it too much to ask that we might even leave here better than we got here?
Yeah, I would love that. I would love that. So so you spent a long time in Dallas. I'm huge, busy agency, so I'm sure you guys have a ton there. So what was your journey like there? Well, let me go back. What made you want to be in law enforcement?
Yeah, the truth is I never really wanted to be in law enforcement. I remember this so well. I was in college, and I was starting to recognize that, I've been in college for 4 years, and most people are about to graduate at this point, and I don't know that the math was really working out for me. So somehow or another, I wasn't as close as I needed to be, and I remember this, so well. I went downstairs, living in an apartment, and went downstairs, grabbed the newspaper, was reading the newspaper, and they talked about Dallas Police Department was having a job fair, and they were Spanish speaking officers were encouraged, or potential candidates that spoke Spanish were encouraged to apply. And I was, again, I was young. I spoke Spanish. I wanted to do something with my life. I really I wasn't sure what to do, but I wanted to do something. And so decided to take a look at the job fair, and went out and went with a few of my friends. And, as we decided to apply, and as we went through the process, one by one, they were weeded out. And then for one reason or another. And so then I was offered that contingent offer that, upon completion of the academy, you'd be given full-time employment as a police officer. And so I decided to give it a try.
So what did your career path look like when you retired? So what position were you holding when you ultimately retired a few months ago?
Yeah, throughout my career, I was involved in a lot of specialized task forces. I was always seemed to be chosen, or applied for some sort of violent crime task force, some sort of special initiative drug task force, and my entire career really reflected that just that. I was on undercover narcotics. I was on major crimes. I eventually promoted to sergeant and became the supervisor over some of these violent crime task forces, and just kind of led throughout my career, kind of maintained that specialized ops, specialized investigations. And then about 8 years ago, I was promoted into the command staff ranks, hopped around, I was the bureau chief over criminal investigations for a while. I was the bureau chief over tactical and special operations for a while. And then finally, in my last role, I was the bureau chief over all patrol operations for the city of Dallas.
Wow, that's quite a plateful. And so fast forward, here you are at Versaterm, and as I mentioned, kind of the parent company to Mindbase. If you could explain to us, one, what position do you hold there at Versaterm? What is kind of your goal there, and how did you get there?
Yeah, the journey there is it's interesting. I'll start off by saying my role is I'm an executive manager over partner success,
Okay.
and partner success really just kind of allows me to use my network that I've created over the 29 years in policing, to just collaborate with colleagues from around the really North America, and just share with them some of the solutions that Versaterm has created for public safety. And they are, we all know that technology it's here. It's part of the first responder profession now. But if you're on that side, on the police side, we really, we don't specialize in technology. We really don't understand it. We know we need something, but
Yeah.
we really don't know the outs and ends of it. And so kind of my role is to be that middle person, to kind of that trusted person that I can say, hey, look, I transitioned over here. I'm understanding these technology solutions, and tell me what your problems are on the first responder side, and I can tell you what solution we have that might fit, how it works. And one of the things about Versaterm that I've appreciated the most is that this is a company, while we have lots of solutions, this is a company that will tell a customer, we don't have the right solution, but this other company does.
Yeah.
And because it is consistently about solving problems. It's not, we don't want to sell them something that isn't going to work for them long term. So
Yeah.
so that's kind of my current role in Versaterm. The path here.
Actually, before we get to the path there, so where many of us are familiar with, well, we're familiar with Mindbase coming into the space, and I know we're probably going to kind of dive a little bit deeper into the Mindbase type stuff to get into our 911 centers. But what is Versaterm? What if you had to describe that type of company and what kind of tools and software you guys are providing that's not just that mind-based piece, how would you explain that?
Versaterm is a complete ecosystem for first responders. I mean, we have solutions for really almost everything that we touch, from assistance in call triage to helping dispatchers through AI eliminate some of the lower priority calls, and let those get answered by a system that doesn't require an immediate response by PD, to helping us process some of the evidence that we capture, that we collect through our physical evidence teams. We have systems and solutions in place for internal affairs, early intervention type systems. Of course, we have the mind-based platform that I think is really preventative as opposed to early. I always like to say that early is a very relative term. You can be early before a first responder is in a critical situation or loses their health or God forbid loses their life, and then you can be early before they might go down a bad path, or you can really be preventative and recognize what it is that is affecting our first responders, our dispatchers, our physical evidence technicians, and our police officers. So anyway, there's a whole sleeve on the wellness front. But really, the bread and butter of Versaterm is their CAD systems, their computer aided dispatch. We have systems to address small agencies, and then the core of them is the larger agencies, and they're really one of the only systems that I know of that can handle the type of volume that a city like Dallas or Los Angeles, the bigger cities, produce, including records management and just growing, just more and more solutions out there for every aspect of the first responder profession.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, because I know that, we'll see the name, et cetera, and it is important to know kind of who you guys are. And now if I'm understanding or if I'm remembering correctly, it was probably over this last year that Versaterm acquired Mindbase. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
It's been about 8 months.
Yeah. And so can you just tell us a little bit about Mindbase, and then we can kind of jump into how you got there? And I think it would make sense to let us know, what it is, then how you got there, and then what your goal is in that process.
Absolutely. So Mindbase, coming from someone who really studied this market for a long time, trying to build something in Dallas, trying to create a healthier culture or something that would better support our men and women in Dallas, I can tell you confidently that Mindbase is a revolutionary product. It is the first of its kind, and it's the only one that is out there. And what it does is it interfaces with our CADs, our computer aided dispatch, and even records management system to pull out the types of calls that our men and women are dispatching or responding to that we deem, or that an agency deems, is unhealthy. And the reason I say it's revolutionary is because, when we look historically at what we have done for mental health support for our men and women, it's all been very reactive in nature. The majority of the support comes out once you're showing all kinds of deterioration, even from just a normal human standard. Like we look at, well, someone is not showing up to work, or they're maybe being rude on their calls, or they're not doing their job correctly. Like even though we know as a baseline they used to do it correctly.
Well, and I think, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I do see this, and I see it often, and then it kind of goes down a discipline road versus saying, "Hey, are you okay? Are you good? Let's have a conversation." We start off right with the discipline because they're falling into that discipline category. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. It's like it reminds me of like the 1980s football coach. And I know I just dated myself here, but it reminds me of that tough nose, you didn't show up to work, or you were late, or you didn't do something right. Therefore, we're going to muscle this out of you. We're going to force you into compliance by, guess what? You get, a suspension now, or you get a mark on your record. And it's the worst strategy. And it really is indicative of not recognizing what the real culprit in the first responder profession is. It is not the shift work. It's not the bad supervisors. It's not the overtime. Those play a role in it.
They do.
But it is what happens before that is really magnifying those things. And again, I say it's very indicative. It's proof, and it's everyday proof that's happening right now in your listeners' agency that shows we 3 to 5 years worth of wellness discussion constantly, and this massive market that exists out there, and we still don't understand what is happening to our emotional health, what is predicating this deterioration of our emotional health. And this mind-based platform, just to circle back around, grabs those calls and puts them up on a display to let you know, hey, take a look at Reuben. Reuben has answered 3 death or dying calls in the last, I don't know, month. And they've also had, X amount of suicide calls. They've had X amount of fatality car crashes. They've had assist calls. Whatever those calls might be, it's finally putting it up on display for, whomever to look at it. And I think what was so important, and the reason I call that mind-based platform revolutionary, is because how can we say that we are serious about wellness when we really can't say what any one of our employees has really experienced over the last quarter, the last year, the last 5 years, over their career? Until we know what they have consumed, we cannot say definitively that we understand emotional health and wellness, because that, in my estimation, and I'll explain why I believe that and why that's my estimation, that's what I believe is the biggest culprit to the first responder profession. It is the cumulative exposure to other people's tragedies, other people's sadness, and other people's grief, i.e., it is emotional. That is what we missed in the first responder profession. Someone mistakenly told us that when we get here in this noble profession to protect and serve, that we somehow needed to not be human, that we needed to dismiss our natural human emotional response. And that was a lie. That was misleading. And as cultural habit, it played a, cultural has a powerful influence that comes along with it. And we followed that unhealthy influence historically, and it led us down some really bad paths. And we are going to do everything we can now to pivot out of this. And in order to do that, we have to be able to know what our men and women are going to. And that's what that mind-based platform brings to light.
And I think I agree 1000% with everything that you said. One of the things that I teach in my classes is I have a slide, and it says, leave your problems at the door. And I often ask the question, how many of you have either heard this in your training or you have said it to trainees, right? Is you need whatever's going on outside of this room, you need to leave outside this room. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with us teaching folks, this is what you need to be on the, first of all, keep your stuff out of here, right? Which to me says, I really don't care about you, right? So we have to stop saying that. Please stop saying that. And then on the flip side of it, we have spent years teaching people what to be on the lookout for, right? So like BOLO for burnout, but we shouldn't even be getting there. And I think you just hit the nail on the head, right? Like we have to get to it before it gets to us.
Yeah, so true. There's so much to that. And on the police side, one of the things we heard was, don't take this stuff home.
Yep,
Leave it in
same
your
thing.
locker
Yeah.
room.
Yeah.
And, first of all, like I wished I had, when I was 22 years old and I had become a police officer, I guess I wish I was braver to back then, or maybe just more wise to be able to say, do you realize that is an impossibility? I just saw a child killed in a car crash. What do you mean, leave it in my locker? It's like, it's impossible. As a matter of fact, I still remember it today. I'm a 52-year-old man now. And so we were giving bad advice from the very start. And we are really, we failed ourselves in the first responder profession. And I know I make some bold statements, and sometimes I do this when I present this nationally. And I've had people say, hey, those are some bold statements here, bold claims you're making. But, I've realized that somebody's got to say them. Yep. And then I can't just say it myself. I need people like you to back me up and say, yeah, that's true. That was my experience as well. Like, we've got to collaborate now, and we've got to take a stand for our men and women. I could make a case that the first responder profession is perfectly designed with the cultures that we have in place. It's perfectly designed to destroy the emotional health of our men and women. And that's a horrible thing to say, but it's true. We consume trauma at an immeasurable rate because we're not measuring it. People who don't have mind goals are not measuring it. Right. We are consuming trauma, and then we say things like, well, you can't take off work though, because we're at minimum staffing, or we have mandatory overtime. And so we are now forcing us to layer upon layer of other people's trauma. We're not able to comfortably come forward and say, hey, this call hurt. And I don't know how I feel, but I don't feel well and I need something. And we don't have systems in place that don't have some sort of punitive response to that. And then when you layer, like for in the police officer side, I mean, we're coming in as new police officers and we want to be accepted. Everyone's looking at us almost with this scrutinizing eye to show that we can't do the job. So we're doing everything in our power to mask it and show that we can. And we're doing it at the expense of our emotional health. And if we do that, if you just do this, and I'm sure science and clinicians will back me up, I say, if you just do that, if you just bury it, you are starting the very first step. This is the first step towards at the very least, towards I guess I hate to say destruction, but at compromising your peace.
Yeah.
And so if you give up your peace, what comes next? Does it create anxiety? Does it create negativism? Does it create anger?
Anger.
Does it create a lane towards alcoholism or drug abuse? Does it destroy our families? And does it eventually cause us to burn out or break down or, God forbid, lose our lives?
And one of the things that I think is really important too is as you are, because for the last few years, as I've been speaking publicly, loudly, about my journey in dealing with PTSD and now getting to the other side and putting the tools in place, I will often see on, social media groups that someone's coming in being a new dispatcher or a new first responder. And does anyone have any advice? And I very rarely see folks, like if I could go back and talk to my baby dispatcher self or my baby firefighter EMT self, I would say, go find Caroline, who is my therapist, and make sure you start doing EMDR like once, if not twice, a month to kind of offload all of that stuff you're carrying. And I think one of the amazing things with Mindbase is not only are you identifying these types of calls that could be weighing on folks, is that there's a timeline, right? So my daughter is she just got onto the fire department. She's 21. And the other day she responded with the ambulance to what I thought was going to be her first really crappy call. Ultimately, it was an overdose with a Narcan situation, and it didn't end the way that I had anticipated, and I wasn't aware of how it actually ended. I just heard the call, and immediately when I knew she had cleared, my first text was, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Yep, I'm fine." And so in my mom mind, my mental health mind, I'm now worried that is she fine? And how far do I push? But I think it's important too, is in a Mindbase or a program like Mindbase, that maybe I get a reminder to check in a few days or a month, because we know that this stuff doesn't happen overnight, right? Like, I can be okay today because I don't want to say anything. I'm new in the service and I don't want people to think I'm weak. But it would be nice if somebody checked on me a little bit down the road too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's a neat segue into the checkpoint strategy that I built for Dallas PD, which led to me partnering up with Mindbase even early on, even before Versaterm acquired them. And what we learned in Dallas PD, building this checkpoint strategy, was that the culture is a thick wall. The culture in our profession has really, if you think about it, for almost, at least in Dallas's case, 150 years, 155 years of police evolution has really spit out every single emotional health or mental health strategy we've created. Like, we chew it up and dismiss it like it's nobody's business. And I recognize that this cultural wall is big, and it isn't going to come down because we introduce a platform like Mindbase, or because we do training on mental resilience. Like, that's not going to take down that cultural barrier, not in any organization. So we needed a multifaceted front, and it needed to be stout, and it needed to be laced in influence. Influence is one of the most powerful forces in our world, right? It's why we do the majority of what we do. It's something influenced us. And so what we aimed to do in the Dallas Police Department with the checkpoint strategy was we were going to capture the most influential leaders we had in our police department, people that had influence, the ones that other people looked up to, the police officers that other police officers went to for advice, from the detectives to the patrol officers to the SWAT operators. We were going to find them, and then we were going to rally them to take on this cause that we called checkpoints. And what we were going to do was we were going to use their influence to start checking on our men and women, including our dispatchers, including our 911 call takers, including our PS technicians, follow-up detectives, everyone that touched an impactful call, not a crisis, but an impactful call, a screaming call, a violent call, a suicide call, fatality car crash call. Those calls we knew were impactful, and we were going to start checking on people with these powerful influencers. And it wasn't going to be therapy. We were never going to ask the question, how are you doing? We were just going to say, hey, Kathy, this is Reuben. I just want to check on you. I know you answered that tough call the other day. Just want to make sure you're okay. Make sure you're all right. And then you might say, in a large agency, you might say, who is this? And I'd say, this is Reuben Ramirez. I'm a patrol officer. I work the evening shift. I just want to check on you. I'm working with peer support. We've got some resources. They're good. If you need them, I'd be happy to send you some information about them, or if there's anyone else you know. If nothing else, save my number. And that's it. That's it. We did it so frequently. We were averaging 200 checkpoints a month. And,
wow.
And some of the other agencies that are doing it are even doing more than that. And we did it with so much repetition that you couldn't help but till that hardened cultural ground. And then when people started doing the research, like let's just say in that scenario that I just gave, where when all of a sudden Kathy calls one of her colleagues and says, hey, who's this Reuben guy that just called me? And they say, well, that guy's a patrol officer. Yeah, he's got a good reputation. He's a good, hardworking patrol officer. And they'll ask you, well, what did he say? And you might say, he just checked on me. And then all of a sudden you're going to start hearing that other people are getting checked on. And so it became this thing that grew so much momentum that we went from initially, I think I had 3 people checking, and that turned into 35, turned into 45. And by the end of the first year, we had another 98 people that said, I'm okay, but I wouldn't mind checking on people too. So we had created like social capital around this strategy. And then when you couple that type of fierce ground tilling initiative with the mind-based platform that's putting it up on display for you to know who to check on, now you start changing culture.
I love this. Yeah. I love this. I love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. I am so excited because I do a lot of work with 911 centers, and that culture right now is it's just hard. And I think where I also see a frustration is when we are training our new trainees, right? And so you have folks that are not well. They're hardened, and they're broken, and they're getting towards the end of their career. They still need to work, but they're passing on this hardened mentality. And so I try to encourage folks, let's not keep passing that on. And the only way we can stop passing it on is if we start to change that culture. So I love this.
Yeah, it's to me, it is the biggest game changer for us. If we could just recognize that almost every entity in the world has some sort of peer support footprint, but the majority of your peer support it operates usually on a voluntary basis, right? It's just almost like hey, who wants to do this? And then it is very reactive in nature. It's looking for behaviors instead of what I call, we need to start looking for feelings. Don't look for behaviors. Behaviors is the manifestation of a bunch of other stuff. But let's recognize what creates feelings, these emotional calls, and let's shift it. Instead of the reactive peer support that's voluntary, let's go out and seek the most influential dispatchers, 911 operators, call takers, from patrol officers to detectives. Let's find them, and let's start checking on people when they go to calls that solicit feelings. And let's just get forward thinking on this, and let's get preventative. Let's really start, getting preventative. It's not too much to ask for, right? For us in this profession, let's just get forward thinking. And it's interesting that we have put so many analytics around the first responder profession. Like we look at everything. We look at how long it took you to answer that, to answer that call, to
Yep.
dispatch that call. You're almost scored and graded on it. Obviously they're reviewing your calls to look for courtesy and other things. Same thing with police officers and their body cams. We're looking at to make sure that they're doing everything right. We're assessing crime on a number of different levels, ups and downs, what types of crimes and why. But yet, with all of our thinking of the importance of analytics to put on for accountability, we never once thought, why don't we analyze what our men and women are consuming, are responding to?
Yep.
And this is to me, this is our chance. This is our way to course correct. And I don't see why any agency in the world couldn't implement the checkpoint strategy. And then if you really want to get, if you want to get real fancy, then all of a sudden, once you start doing this strategy as your core, now you couple that with the analytics that just show it and put it on display. Now you've got a wellness strategy. And I think what we've needed to do is we never should have been trying to correct this problem by just hosting a training, because training is only as good as the listener or the student, is willing to receive it.
Yep.
We should have been making people feel wellness, not telling them wellness. We should have been making them feel it. And this strategy helps you feel it. And I just think it is a game changer. I think every entity, first responder entity and beyond, should implement this. I believe in it with everything I have. I wouldn't have left.
So what prompted this for you? Were you having, were you struggling at any point? Was there something that kind of launched this for you, that you realized it was something that had to be done? Was it personal to you, or was it something you were seeing?
Well, it was kind of a couple things. I drew the short straw when we were in an internal affairs hearing. Yet another police officer was being investigated and subsequently terminated for some alcohol related incident. And I remember in this particular hearing, I could not help but wonder how these young men and women were in just such only a few short years were just struggling with alcohol or were in these difficult these situations that they found themselves. And I always thought it was part of something bigger. Well, usually when you ask enough questions, you wind up getting tasked with it. And so I remember the chief of police looked over at me. I was sitting 2 seats to his left. And he says, "Reuben, I want an assessment of the Dallas Police Department. I want to know what resources we have available. Are they being utilized? Why or why not? And I want it, on my desk. I want a report on my desk." And I think he said he wanted it by the end of the month. And so I kind of went out and did my little assessment. And, as you can imagine, no one's really thrilled to talk to an assistant chief about their mental health. And so I wasn't getting a lot of really good responses. But until we had done these focus group conversations where I really sat down with men and women and I said, what are we doing wrong? I don't know how to fix this, but I suspect you do. And, there's a story in this where I got challenged. I'll share this with your listeners. This is really good.
Please do.
In one of these focus group conversations, it was with patrol officers, and there was this one patrol officer who was seeming to have like almost a visceral response to my question about what their emotional health was. And he had his arms folded and he was kind of moving in his chair, and he really didn't like the line of questioning that I was asking. And I decided to challenge him, and I said, I walked up to him and I said, "Officer, is there something on your mind? Is there something that you want to share?" And he looked up at me and he says to me very candidly, very directly, he says, "Chief, I want to know why you care." He says, "You've been on this command staff a long time. What have you ever done for our mental health? What have you ever done for our health? And why do you care now?" And it stunned me. Like, first of all, we were in a group of about 10 or 12, and it just got awkward, right? Like,
right.
And I thought for a minute, I remember my first thought was, man, this guy's got some nerve. But then, I paused and I thought about it for a minute, and I thought, man, I had asked for them to speak freely, and his question was incredibly valid. I had been on the command staff for a long time. I had never done anything for mental, emotional health. Matter of fact, mine wasn't even that good. And if I'm being perfectly honest, at the time. And so I shared with him a few things that were personal. And I said, it was along the lines of, I'm probably the last person that should be trying to, understand mental health. And I told him, I said, I'm not that healthy myself. And I said, there's times when I walk in this building and I can't even breathe. And I said, I wound up telling him something about my son. And I said, but what really, I think maybe one of the things that scares me the most, I said, is I have a 20, at the time, I had a 14-year-old son and a 18-year-old son at the time. They're older now. And I said, this was a couple of years ago. And I said, I think what scares me the most is that one day my boys are going to tell me that they want to be police officers. And I'm scared to death of that thought. And I said,
Yep.
and what scares me is not that they would get hurt out here. What scares me the most, I actually think they'd both be great police officers. But what scares me the most is what this job would do to their mind. And I said, and this is coming from a man who has had only success in his police career. I've had a fantastic career. I have nothing to complain about. I've had given every opportunity that I could have wanted and more. And I said, but I just want to make this place better for them, if nothing else. And so when I said that, this one police officer, he unfolded his arms and he kind of sat up in his chair. And all of a sudden, the floodgates just opened. And that's when I heard things like, you want to know what's hard about this job, Chief? It's the sound of wailing mothers and at homicide scenes. And I heard things like, it's the contorted bodies at fatality car crashes. It's the smells, it's the sights. You never forget them. I heard things about suicides and the awkward space that our men and women are in when they're experiencing this crisis. Tragedy has occurred and they don't know what to even do. And I thought, in all of our trainings, for resilience or for mental health or whatever kind of trainings, tactical, operational training, no one ever taught us how to grieve.
Yep.
No one ever taught us that we might need to learn to grieve. No one ever taught us how to be in this awkward space or hear something horrible and how to process it in a healthy manner. No one ever did. And so it was through that I came up with this checkpoint, the strategy, being that we need to get really, really early on this. We don't need to be waiting, because every one of those calls that they described that were difficult, not one of those was going to solicit any emotional health support. Those were in fact all routine calls.
Yep.
And then when I was trying to design what we would do, that's when I reflected on a call that I responded to really early on in my career. I was 24 years old. I was a young patrol officer. I had responded to a missing girl called missing 3-year-old. And when I arrived on the call, her father came running out into this parking lot to meet my police car, carrying his little girl, and he handed her to me, and he told me that she had a little bit of life left, and he had found her. I would learn later that he had found her floating in a swimming pool. And anyway, it's just a real difficult call to process, but and I struggled. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I really didn't understand why. At that stage in my career, I'd already seen, plenty of homicides and suicides in this major market in this major city that I was in. But there was something about this little girl, something about this dad handing her to me. There's something about the mom and her screams that I really couldn't shake. And the most unsuspecting of police officers, about 2 days removed from that call, sent me a message to my computer screen and just asked me my location. And I told him, and he pulled up side by side to my police car. And he very directly said, "Reuben, how are you?" And I said, his name was Lee Bollinger. And I said, "I'm fine, Lee." And he says, "Reuben, that call you went to the other day," he says, "those calls can be tough." And he says, I responded and said, "Yeah." I said, I wish I could have saved that little girl's life." And he shared this story with me that I'll never forget. He very briefly says to me, he goes, "Reuben, when I was a young patrol officer," he said, "I answered a car crash." He goes, "There was a little boy in the bed of a pickup truck." He said, "And that pickup truck rolled over on top of that little boy." And he says, "Reuben, when I got to that call," he says, "that little boy was alive." He says, "I spoke to him." He says, "We eventually picked that truck up and rushed that little boy to the hospital." And he says to me, he says, "Reuben, that little boy died." He said, and I've spent the last 20 years of my career angry. He said, I've been mad at everyone. He goes, I've been mad at the city. I've been mad at my supervisor, the police chief, the mayor. He says, Reuben, I just don't want to see the same thing happen to you. And he says to me, he says, why don't you go talk to somebody? And I listened to him. I didn't really know exactly what I was feeling at the time. I didn't know why he had chosen to share this with me, but he connected with me by sharing that story.
Yep.
It was empathetic. It was compassionate. It was real.
And he was telling you that it was okay to
yes,
feel the way you were feeling.
yes. He was like giving me permission.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he gave me guidance. He said, why don't you go talk to somebody? I'll tell you a little further. I didn't say it, but he says to me specifically, he says, you go to church. Why don't you go talk to somebody at your church? Like he gave me, here's a real life application for you, Reuben. You go to church. Why don't you talk to somebody? And I'll tell you, Tracy, I put my car in drive that night. And I was on the evening shift, and I drove straight to a church that was down the road. I knew of it. And I knocked on that door and I talked to somebody that night. And there was a reframing that this priest gave to me that night that I had never in a million years could have come up with. I'm going to share it with you. Actually,
Please do.
I knock on this door that night, and I knocked. It was a Catholic church, and a priest answered the door, and he says, to me, officer, what's wrong? And oh gosh, I remember this now, but I said to him, I told him the story. I said, I can't eat, can't sleep. And I told him the story about this little girl. And he says, did you know this little girl? And I said, no, I'd never met her before in my life. And he asked me, did you know the family? And I said, no, I just answered the call. And he says to me, you can't eat, you can't sleep. And he says, officer, he says, what you're describing, he says, is grief. He says, you're grieving for someone that you don't even know. And he says to me, officer, he says, that is going above and beyond the call of duty. He says, that is protecting and serving at the highest level. And I remember that when he said that to me, like I felt some kind of relief, almost like a different reframing of this horrible event. I looked at it as if somehow I was doing something that was noble by suffering, by my, not sleeping or eating. Like there was he reframed it for me. And I'm not going to say to your listeners that changed my life or changed the trajectory of my career. I won't say that, but I will say that at that particular moment, it was a reframing that I didn't have a single friend or family member in my life that could have ever come up with that reframing. Right. It was a professional perspective, and it was at just the right time. And so I would learn 24 years later as an assistant chief in that internal affairs hearing when I was tasked with building this program, I would later learn that moment was meant for me to take perfect note of it. And so now the checkpoint strategy that I built is exactly framed around that interaction. Everything we do is we check on people. Everything we do is encourage our men and women to counseling. We talk about solutions out there in the technology world, and we talk about solutions in a number of different contexts. But the reality is the greatest solution that exists out there for the mental and emotional health of first responders is counseling and therapy. This is $1 billion industry for a reason, because it works. The problem is us first responders just don't go. The checkpoint strategy, coupled with the mind-based platform, is designed perfectly to check on our men and women at the most opportune time. We operate off of a formula that says you take an emotional call and you plug in a person of influence in just the right timing, not too early before they've even had a chance to even process what they've just experienced, and not too late before they've turned to a poor or unhealthy coping strategy. Within 72 hours, an emotional situation plus an influencer within a 72-hour window, and you create the most opportune, greatest opportunity for change in your organization, change in your culture. The change we were looking for was a healthier culture. Our strategy was to do that touch point and send and encourage our men and women to counseling and therapy. And then we did everything behind that to find the counselors for them. We pulled counselors off of our insurance. We pulled counselors that were available to us for a discounted rate for first responders. We pulled those that were local. We found every counselor we could, and we vetted and we made it. We were going to take out every single scene for our first responders. When I talked about that scenario earlier, let's say I contacted you and I said, "Hey Tracy, it's Reuben. Just want to check on you." And and you said, "I'm fine." The call was sad though. And I'd say, "Well, listen, we've got some good resources. They're counselors, therapists. Some of them are free. They're for you, your family. I'd be happy to send them to you." When we sent you this information, they were already going to be vetted. They were already going to be someone that was convenient. We were already going to have a funding source to be able to pay for it, whether it was through your insurance or it was through one of our nonprofits. We were going to take out every scene in order to get you to that counselor. And we believed that that was our solution, counseling and therapy, and we're going to use our influence to get our men and women there. And
And
I
I
will
think
tell
and
you,
I think that's hugely important because as someone who travels across the country speaking on mental health, trying to get folks to understand, I again, we all do something similar, but we'll have a little bit of a different spin to it. You call it a checkpoint. I call it reaching in, right? So we've heard the phrase a million times. If you're struggling, reach out. I know that I've had a place where I was not going to reach out. In my mind, I was too much of a burden, and in that moment, I was not going to reach out. And what it took was someone inadvertently reaching in the moment to say, "Hey," some folks have heard that story of mine, and it's a matter of it's that, like you said, touch point, checkpoint, reaching in, letting people know. Again, another one of my sayings, I usually have a sticker around here somewhere. The sticker, one of the sayings that I've adopted is, "It's okay to not be okay. You just can't stay there." Right? So we've been saying for years, it's okay to not be okay. But the added piece that I add in everything that I do is, it's not okay to stay there. So being able to take some of these tools and the mindset that you guys are offering is definitely looking at things a little bit differently, and you should be very proud of the work that you're doing. This is the shift that we've needed for a long time.
thank you. That means a lot, Tracy. I appreciate it. Really, I do.
Yeah, yeah. And so what else does the mind-based kind of suite, if you will, look like? So you mentioned that it also, it has the ability to kind of flag those calls and start that process. But what else is it doing for us? I know there's some other cool things that it does, but if you want to share on that aspect.
Yeah. So, by flagging those calls, it gives whoever, whether it's a clinician or a supervisor, the ability to kind of see cumulatively what our men and women are responding to and how they compare to their peers. That's one piece of it. The other piece is that through that check-in, we will be able to tell just really through a basic question, like, or through that check-in, whether the officer was resistant to the check-in, receptive, or requested resources. All of this is anonymous, so we're not capturing who the staff member is, but we are being able to gauge whether there's resistance or receptiveness in that particular group or that particular division or precinct. But we also are able to, through conversation, find out if when people share with us, well, I'm struggling with, I've got an elderly mother, or, we've got some financial stuff or some relationship stuff. So then the department knows what types of resources that we need to be messaging out or pushing out or hiring to come in and do speaker series. Like, I'm a big fan of speaker series. Like, these are things that really, there's some powerful speakers out there, and they connect with us. And if we bring our families, our children to some of these things, you really get a better understanding of that. We're all carrying the same stuff. We're all very in the same boat here, but you can kind of tailor those resources to what you're learning from your men and women. It also allows you to kind of put in anniversary dates to things.
Yeah.
One of the things that we're really bad about in our profession is something bad happens, we come out and we support, but then it's like we go on and forget about it. Well, the person who was affected by it doesn't. And
Correct.
so putting in quarterly reminders or an anniversary reminder for that staff member, as well as maybe others that were involved in it, maybe close friends of theirs, just to kind of remind them and let them know, hey, we haven't forgot about this. So you can put those kind of reminders in as well. And then the Mindbase platform now just, has all sorts of additional resources, from our own, something to help us sleep better at night, from sleep sounds to personal check-ins to podcasts. Really just a ton of resources that are out there in the world. We capture them and bring them into your app on
And
your
I
phone.
well, and I love that because in this little phone that I have right here, if I see something that pops up on social media as, a tragic call that a friend has dealt with, because I think the other thing too, I'll go back and then I'll come forward a little bit, is in public safety, we are a part of so many social media followings where we're also being exposed to probably more than the average person is being exposed to. So my neighbor who is not in public safety doesn't necessarily, even with me not being in the center, I'm still seeing an overabundance of tragedy that's affecting the people that I care about across the country. And so whether I share it or, shoot them a message like, hey, saw that, you guys had a horrible call, I'm also putting those anniversary dates in my phone to make sure that, leading up to it. And you were right. Like, I do think asking someone generally, like, hey, how's it going? How are you, is okay. Dear friend Ryan Dedman got me on to, digging a little bit deeper. The way that I will put it is on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being wicked awesome. Where are you today? And I've put a little survey in many of my classes. And what is sad to me is the majority of the people that are answering that question, kind of that little interactive little poll, is on a scale of 1 to 10. And the answers are 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 10. And the majority of our folks are hovering between 4 to 6. And so we need to capture those things. We need to get better at them, and we need to provide those tools. And it sounds like that's just what you guys are doing at Versaterm and Mindbase.
Yeah, I believe we are. I think we're going to raise a lot of eyebrows, and this thing is really going to get a lot of momentum. There's something that is really powerful about what you described there when you recognize that someone, a friend or a colleague or someone is experiencing something, and you reach out and check on them. One of the things that my checkpoint officers told me repeatedly was, Chief, I think I get more out of this than the people I'm checking.
Agreed.
Yes, 100%. Right? Yes,
1,000%.
yes.
1,000%.
And that's why I think we are changing culture in the organizations that have implemented this checkpoint strategy, is because it goes both ways. The mechanism starts to work. You're checking on people, which is really, in my opinion, and I'm a faith guy, but I will tell you that in my opinion, that's what we're here to do. Like, we
Yep.
are designed to help people. So
Yep.
when we get into some of these mindsets or these routines where we're just kind of looking out for ourselves, or it's kind of like this, I've got to, protect myself only. That is counterintuitive or incongruent to the way we're built. And
Yep.
so helping people, it just recharges you and it remotivates you. And I tell people, I think the checkpoint strategy gives us the medicine that we've all needed to be able to start healing from this massive consumption of trauma, that this secondary and vicarious trauma
I
that we.
love that. One of the things that I had started saying way back when, I don't even know when it started, but folks will know me by the phrase. I often say, "Hey hero, stay safe, stay strong, stay here. We need you." And I had a Texas director reach out and ask if I had anything with that phrase on it that he wanted to give it to his telecommunicators. And I was like, "Oh, I have some stickers," but I didn't have stickers, but I was going to get some stickers because that, we like stickers. And so ironically, I have one here. And these stickers have become so much a part of who I am that I hand them out to first responders all over the country. And the best part about it is I don't say anything. Like, if I see a police officer, if I see a firefighter, an EMT, a dispatcher, I see folks, dispatchers in the airport and such. I'm at a conference, and I'll just walk over and say, "May I hand you a sticker?" And the best part about it for me is just when I walk away, I don't say anything else. I just walk away and I kind of watch from a distance and I see them look at it, I see them read it, and then they like look up and look for me like, who was that masked woman? Like where did she come from? And there is no better feeling for me to know that I may have just been what my reach in did for me, right? If someone's feeling like they don't belong, they're a burden, that it's too much for them, it's bigger than them, and to just know, like just in 1 second, that somebody cares about you, even a stranger, is huge. So I agree with every person, and in every one of my classes I will hand those out to the folks in the class, and then I encourage them to take a picture of the sticker and send it to just 5 people. Just at some point today, just send it to 5 people and watch what comes back. And it's healing. I think it's healing for all of us.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. It's that medicine we all need. I always tell people after my presentations, yeah, you don't have to wait for us to tell you about the checkpoint strategy or teach you the checkpoint strategy or even have a demo for the mind base. Pick up your phone and just somebody that's crossed your mind. They crossed your mind for a reason. Somebody that's on your mind right now, whether it's a family member, first responder, just send them a message and just say, just checking on you.
Yep.
And watch what happens. And inevitably people either they come to my website or they just tell me, hey, thank you. I started checking on people. And this is what, this is what our society needs more than ever right now. Like everyone who listens to this, just check on somebody, just check on them. And
that's it.
It pays out tenfold.
It really does. Well, unfortunately, we have to wrap up, and that makes me sad because I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure our paths will be crossing again. But is there anything else you want to leave with our listeners?
No, listen, I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for what you're doing. Thank you for your service. Thank your listeners for their service. I will take a quick plug. Just if you want to know anything more about Mindbase, it's Get Mindbase. You can learn more about the platform and how it works. Certainly visiting Versaterm, you can see about all of our solutions. The checkpoint strategy is under Start Checkpoints, like start as in begin checkpoints, but startcheckpoints.com. And it gives you the whole layout. There's history there on why we do what we do and how to get this program started in your agency. And I want to collaborate with people like yourself. I think it's going to take a movement. We're all going to have to really join forces to move the needle on this thing. We are operating up against a very powerful and almost generational, I guess, in some cases, cultural wall. But this battle is I like to tell people this battle is fought on this side of the thin blue line. This is on our side. We have to get inside of this thing and start beating this thing from the inside out. There are massive, market of wellness out there. There's fantastic solutions. But if we do our part inside of the cultural wall, we will get our men and women to those resources and hopefully start to or continue to improve and save lives.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you again, Reuben, and I'm sure I will see you out there somewhere in this wonderful place of ours. And I look forward to sharing a coffee and getting more insight from you. This has been a great conversation, and I hope you stay safe and stay well. So thank you. Hey, heroes. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please like and follow us on our On Scene First social media so you too can keep up with our shenanigans. And make sure you get to know our friends over at Squad Life. You can start by heading over to their social media, giving them a follow, and thank them for being a hero sponsor. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and stay here. We need you.